I've had like 4 years worth of experiences stuffed into 2025. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. What a year 2025 has been. Quite possibly the best Land Rover year I've ever had. We're gonna take a quick look back at some of the notable things that happened this year. I do this every year, mainly so I have something to look back at as a little reminder of all the fun we get to have around here, and 2025 was no different. In true Freelander fashion, we started the year off broken. Yes, our beloved little 3-door Freelander left us stranded. The electronic throttle body failed, left us stranded in a parking lot. We had to trailer it back to the ranch. May have been a little bit of foreshadowing to what happened later in the year. But the first real exciting part of 2025 happened in February. Ted and I made our first trip out to Maine for the winter romp event. And if you have not done this, I recommend it fully. It is a do not miss. It is on the proverbial bucket list for any Land Rover enthusiast. It's always upwards of 300 Land Rovers playing out on the Millennium Green, which is a beautiful place to play around in the snow. Normally, when we think of February and a vacation, I think of going south, but somehow we went more north. Didn't make a whole lot of sense. The East Coast Rover crowd is always a fun time. If you haven't been snowwheeling is some of the most fun, minus the cold part. But the good thing is we were in a vehicle that is well prepared for the winter. Yes, Ted's 1967 Series 2A. Like I said, it was cold. But while we were out there, we had a little challenge with Justin from Lucky 8 and Ralph from Sarek. We all had some series trucks and did a little snow wheeling.
The Yeti's gonna get you.
And to no surprise, yours truly won the challenge, although maybe a little bit of a technicality because Ralph's was more Isuzu than Land Rover. But a win's a win. Then we followed the winter romp up with quite possibly the biggest move of the year. And I mean that quite literally. We bought an old defunct car wash. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. The f is this place? That is the car wash I am sitting in right here, and that is now the new headquarters to the Lost Cause Ranch. That also came with selling the original ranch. Yes, the one that we built our dream shop. It was a cool piece of property. 11 wooded acres, cool custom home that was a personal home of the architect who designed it. That awesome shop. We finished the shop, then sold it. But selling the ranch opened up many doors, especially in 2025. We wouldn't have been able to take all the trips and have all the adventures that we did without loosening up some of our responsibility. Taking care of property like that does take time, so the downsizing of responsibilities really made this year that much better. Little sad, but we also gained a proper commercial workshop once again. A little better parking lot to store more random Land Rovers. Just what I needed. But we made this move for many reasons, and most of those are future reasons, just kind of lining life up. And like I said, eventually I think I want to move to a bigger property, and this let us bridge that gap until that time. But who knows what the future holds. We now have a car wash that is no longer a car wash. You know, as one might call it, a bit of a lost cause. And speaking of freeing up time for trips and adventures, the Rover Ball. 2025 was the inaugural Rover Ball, and it was probably one of the best trips I've ever had in my life. And I've had a lot of trips, so that is saying a lot. We had 12 Land Rovers, 23-ish people, correct me if I'm wrong, that went all the way from Red Bull Garage in New York to the Portofino Hotel in Redondo Beach, California. The true start and end point to a cannonball run. And what a wild experience that was. We took our beloved Freelander that let us down earlier in the year. That should have been a sign that it probably wasn't the right thing to drive across the country twice. But it did make it from Iowa to New York, back to Ohio, where we had one of the most insane experiences. The Freelander broke 27 miles away from my buddy's shop in Ohio. And that was the end of our Rover Ball until he offered up a NAS Defender 90 to make the rest of the trip. So we were able to continue on with the other 11 Land Rovers, including another Freelander that made it. I'm a little chapped about that still.
Great-great-grandfather used to say, by hook or by crook, it might be on the hook.
And in some other news, my Freelander's doing fine. And we had some awesome stops along the way. Ironically, I live in Iowa and I've never been to the world's largest truck stop in Iowa. It is 60 miles from here. It took me driving from New York to California to actually finally visit it. We also camped at a lake in Nebraska. I didn't know Nebraska had anything besides flat and nothing. We made a stop in Moab. The Defender needed a little break. We paid $8.49 for a gallon of gas in California, the most insane thing in my life. Something as fuel efficient as the Defender. We're gonna get a little bit of gas. And by a little bit, I mean a frickin' little bit. $8 I've never seen one count so freaking fast. So the main reason we stopped at this $9 a gallon gas station is because Joe needs to use the bathroom.
Really bad.
Really bad, actually.
Really bad. And I'm here to point them out to him, right where they are.
Oh, the facilities.
Yep.
Are freaking incredible. See, we got the restroom sign pointed to the restrooms. Look at them. They look really freaking nice. Oh, if you didn't want the porta shitters, we have a porta trailer, poop trailer. Oh, it's got wood grain. Oh my God. And then we rolled into Redondo Beach at the Portofino Hotel at nearing midnight. So Justin drove the Freelander 3,000 miles across the country.
3,200.
3,200, just so he could put it where it belongs. And being we're out in California, we also got to stop by our buddy Steve from the Underpowered Hour and check out his place. That's been on the list for a while, and it was neat to do that, even though it was kind of a rough day. Then we made the trek back to Iowa, and in true levels of Joe being prepared, ran out of gas. A Defender cannot do 300 plus miles per tank. Who would have thought? The Defender is now a 3-liter supercharged outfit.
Hey, Joe, you got any fuel in that Menards bucket you keep in the back?
I guess Menards doesn't have everything. But we made it back, and that is the most memorable 6,000 mile trip I have ever taken. It is also the only 6,000 mile trip I have taken. But no, that was some of the most fun I've ever had. What a great group of people. And all of us have made a lot of friends for life over that trip. And I'm happy that we made it to the inaugural one. When we got back to Iowa from the Rover Ball, it started off our crazy little deliveries of what was one of the major reasons for getting the car wash. Yes, we got a load of CNC machining equipment. Starting off with the most sketchy trip I've ever taken to purchase something, and that was a CNC lathe somewhere in Indiana. Weird trip. But we got it back here nice and safe, me and the machine. We also got a CNC press brake that was the bane of my existence for most of the year. I think we finally have that working. It was a pain in my butt for 6 months though. And then the big centerpiece is a Brother vertical machining center. I'm super excited. So the car wash has 3-phase power and a lot of it, and I've always wanted some of this equipment. So this, coupled with our CNC laser, our CNC plasma, our welders, our manual mill, manual lathe, tube bender, we will be able to do whatever we want to do here at the car wash. Super exciting to see what that holds in the future. We're working on learning how to use all that. No better way to learn than to do, I guess. It's just gonna be an expensive learning curve. And then since we have a little more room to park Land Rovers, what's that mean? We bought more Land Rovers, starting off with a very cool one. This is a Series 2A lightweight. I'm excited to get this one going. This one ties into our Moab trip, and our Moab trip changed the trajectory of this project, and it is going to be a pretty epic one. Super excited to have some bulletproof axles underneath this thing and just have a completely different experience than I'm used to, including the most underpowered diesel engine we can put in it, at least for the time being, and we're gonna drive this thing all over. Then we bought another cool Land Rover that is a D1 without any rust, and if you're in the Rust Belt, that is almost unheard of. Then we followed that up with another cool Land Rover, an X-Mod Defender 110. In true project fashion, no engine. But we did just line up an engine for that. We're gonna go pick that up in January and get that guy back on the road. It's just a cool thing. And what do you follow up purchasing a classic Defender with? The most ridiculous thing I've ever purchased. Yes, the 6-wheel Discovery 2, which is actually a Discovery 1, which is actually 2 Discovery 1s, which is a 6x6, but it's actually a 6x4. Oh, and it has an LS swapped into it, and a Long Ranger truck cab. This is just the most ridiculous thing, and I just had to have it. We're gonna try and make this actually 6-wheel drive in 2026, so stay tuned for that. Undecided exactly how we're gonna do that yet, but we got plans, just not concrete ones. And speaking of Long Ranger cabs, we also delivered our loaner NAS 90 back to its owner, picked up the Freelander, and continued on to New York, visiting Lucky 8, and picked up a special Acme crate, which the contents inside you will see on the very next video, which is also the first video of 2026. So stay tuned to figure out exactly why we drove all the way to New York for that crate. And in the middle of all this, we swapped a Callaway engine out of a Range Rover P38. Yes, there was a couple hundred P38s that were modified by Callaway, the Corvette modifier tuner. And it's a pretty special little 4.6 liter. We swapped that into our favorite Land Rover, the Eco Challenge Disco. And that was to get ready to go out to the National Land Rover Rally in Moab, Utah. In typical Joe fashion, it was a lot of late nights and last minute preparation to get the Eco Challenge all ready to go. And we trailered that behind our Range Rover L405. Man, I can't even keep the year straight. We bought a 5-liter supercharged Range Rover. And we bought that because we blew the LR4 up. When I'm looking back, I've had like 4 years worth of experiences stuffed into 2025. It's been such a wild ride. And I truly want to thank all of you for joining along the way. I don't make any money doing this, but all of you, all the comments, all you guys watching, kind of motivates me to keep track of it all. And I have a lot of fun putting all the videos out, and it gives me a lot of motivation to do what we're doing around here. So I truly want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I met a lot of great people and even greater friends through the whole YouTube and internet universe. It's just been a pretty wild ride. So we took that Range Rover and we trailered our Eco Challenge out to Moab. She's a bit rough shape. And in Moab, met up with some of the greatest people and just had a great time. It is impossible to have a bad time in Moab, but not only did we not have a bad time, we had the single best day of wheeling I've ever had. And I was just a passenger. I hopped in my new buddy Jeff's Series 1. Ted hopped into another Series 1, and we were with another Series 1. And a pretty built up Discovery 2, and we did Pritchett Canyon. And this was just one of the most incredible days I've ever had out on the trails. And I've said it many times, it was a perspective change. And it really changed what I want to do with the lightweight. I want to have this kind of fun. And in addition to all the other Land Rovers we have, I want to have the ability to have a completely different experience, and the lightweight is going to be that. But we also met the guys from TFL, Tommy and Case. And that trip leads to a little bit more that happened later in the year. But the entire group of Land Rover people out there were just a blast. We had a lot of fun on the trails. Had a great group out on Hell's Revenge.
That's pretty awesome. Driven by a guy with a really cool YouTube channel.
Finished off the week with an awesome trail where we took the Range Rover on Klondike Bluffs, a back entrance into Arches National Park. Just a cool experience overall. We also made a proper usable shop out of the car wash and installed a 2-post lift. It's been 3 years since we sold the commercial shop, and that was the last time I had a lift. And man, did I miss that. There is just something about not having to crawl on the ground. If you can do it, I recommend it, and you don't know what you're missing until it's gone. And speaking of the Range Rover L405, that thing has just been incredible. It's been way better than I ever expected. 510 horsepower. How do you beat it? But what shocked me was just how good it is at towing another Land Rover. We put 12,000 miles on it since June, and 7,000 of those miles have had a Land Rover in tow. I had no problems towing Land Rovers with my LR4, but this has just been another step above. We took the Eco Challenge through the Rocky Mountains, pulling it up over 11,000 feet, and it never skipped a beat, and I am just utterly impressed with that thing. We haven't had to do anything but oil changes. It now has over 100,000 miles, and it's just frickin' rocking. But back to meeting Tommy from TFL at Moab. Tommy rode with us on Hell's Revenge for a little bit, and he just loved the D1. And he went ahead and picked himself up a super nice Discovery 1. The only not nice thing was, in typical Rover V8 fashion, it has bad head gaskets. They're from Colorado, we're from Iowa. We met Tommy in Omaha.
That's right, we're meeting up with my buddy Joe from Lost Cause Ranch, who does nothing but old Land Rovers.
And grabbed his D1, and we currently have that here at the shop, repairing it for him. And then they're gonna come out here and hopefully drive it back to Colorado, and us getting to help Tommy out with that stemmed from meeting up in Moab. When you start driving all over the country, especially for Rover events, the world becomes much smaller. We now have friends with Rovers throughout the entire country. And that brings us to the end of the year. And the end of the year, we did something I have never done with a Land Rover, and that is remove the body from the LR4. I have missed the budget LR4. That thing has been the workhorse and the most useful Land Rover I've ever owned. I've had 2,000 pounds worth of wood pellets in the back of it. We've hauled other Land Rovers with it. I've pulled trees down with the winch up front, and I just miss having that thing around. So shockingly, removing the body from an LR4 is one of the more easy things you could do. We did it in 3.5 hours. I think I could do it in 2, not filming. And we now have the engine torn down, and we're gonna get that guy fixed. And we're also going to utilize a little bit of what came in this Acme crate to make it even more useful, just in a little different fashion than the useful it was before. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys following along for the entirety of 2025. It's been a blast. I have you guys to thank for it, and I hope you guys can follow along for even more fun in 2026. It's shaping up to be 2025 on steroids. I can't even make this up. I just got done filming. We hop in the Freelander. I guess the year's gonna end as it starts. Broken Freelander.